Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to get started with Poker GTO Strategy, how to learn the Poker GTO software, and get your feet wet with the solvers for free. Coming up next. There are three main GTO programs, also called solvers, on the market right now. I've used them all, and they each have different pros and cons. In future videos, I'll go into more depth with each of them, but for now, I want to jump right into one of them and show you how to get started. These are the three different ones. You've got PO Solver, Simple Post Flop, and GTO Range Builder, or GTORB. So GTORB is the one we will be getting into today. It's a good one to start with because you can use it right out of the browser, whereas the other ones you download, they're standalone. As you get more advanced, I'd probably suggest switching to one of the other two, the standalone varieties. But GTORB is also nice because it has a very graphical user interface, whereas the other ones are more tabular. And I think the graphical nature, this visual you see here, is part of what makes it easier to understand at first. Another thing about these tools is that you can use them all for free as long as you're solving situations that occur on the turn or the river. If you want to do flop calculations, then you have to pay for them. From another perspective, solving poker hands gets much more complex when you start from the flop or even pre-flop, super complex. Given the fact that you have two unknown cards still to come on the flop and 3 rounds of betting that could potentially happen, the average tree is exponentially bigger than decision trees on later streets, or whereas on the river, you're going to be solving the simplest tree. This is why I would suggest starting with river spots anyway to learn GTO. Number one, the situations are less complex, and number two, you can use these tools for free. One more reason the river is a good place to start is because you can apply GTO equations. If you've heard of things like 1 minus alpha, the equations match the solutions, and that's not necessarily the case on the flop. On the flop, the equations tend to break down, and you have to rely completely on what the software tells you if you're trying to approximate or trying to follow a GTO solution. So for today, I'm going to take a hand from my database and walk you through how I'd go about using this GTO solver to figure it out. It might be a good idea to pick one of your own hands and follow along with me and pause the video and try it out for yourself in GTORB. That's probably the best way for you to learn this. Here's the hand I'm going to be using for my example. I'm going to walk through it first and then we can go back and talk about ranges. I have a6 of green, a6 of clubs. Our villain opens to 2 big blinds in the cutoff. We 3-bet to 6 big blinds. He calls. We flop a flush draw. He checks. We bet about half pot. He calls. Turn. We check back. You could bet, you could check here, and you could also use the tool to figure out what the GTO play is. My guess is it'll be a mixed strategy. Sometimes we're checking, sometimes we're betting. And then we get to the river, and our opponent pots it, and we fold. So the fold here on the river is pretty straightforward. And what we're going to do with the tool today is figure out what we should be doing with our entire range that we have in this spot. Which hands should we be calling with? So that's the problem. Again, starting with a river example, it really is your best bet because it's going to be the least complex. We could use the tool as well to figure out what we should be doing on the turn, as I mentioned. And then the last thing, a quick aside I want to mention is as you pick your own hand to try in the tool, I would recommend starting with a hand where ranges are tighter. This is a 3-bet pot, so our ranges are definitely going to be tighter than if it was a single raise pot. You could also opt for earlier positions, like early versus middle would be better than, say, blind versus blind. The reason is as the ranges get really wide, it's just going to be more complex as far as narrowing ranges throughout the hand, which is the exercise we're going to do next. Coming back to the tool, the first thing you will want to do when you get to the GTOR page is click Try It for Free. And you will need to, you can log in as with Facebook or Google+. I think mine is Google+. I'll do that now. And here's a welcome screen. I think if you click through the next, it will give you a quick rundown. I will let you do that on your own time. But yeah, that's a nice guide to getting started. Another thing I'm going to do here is I'm holding down Control and moving my mouse wheel so I can fit a little more. There we go. Get it on the screen for you guys. And now we are ready to start putting our hand in. Again, I'm going to go straight to the river with this one. I'm reading off the board as I just had it. And the board is 8 of hearts, 7 of clubs, 2 of clubs. Let's see if I can keep adding. Queen of spades and 4 of spades. Okay, there's our hand. On the river, in my example, the pot was 26, we'll say. Current effective stacks on the street, let's see, prior to my opponent's bet was 86. Again, you can do this, follow along with your own hand. Current street effective stacks 86. Hero in position, yes, I was. Number of bet sizes, we'll just do 1, keep it simple. Bet percentage, our opponent bets, let's put 100%. That's what happened. You can play with all of this stuff, and I encourage you to do so. I am going to come straight to these advanced. Out of position, must check. No, he's actually betting. Max number of raises. So one of the things this is going to tell us is maybe what our opponent should do with his range. Shove of stack. I'm going to leave the rest of this, include a shove. Yeah. We don't need to change anything there. So the next major piece to this is putting ranges in. And this is a big assumption. And again, for all of your assumptions, I encourage you to play with them if you're not sure. If you're not sure what his hands are, then try different ranges. Try one set of hands and then make it a little tighter, make it a little narrower. One approach is to kind of do a conservative estimate and non-conservative estimate. So what you're effectively doing is bounding or doing some tolerance testing on your hand. Because if you make it really conservative and really not conservative, then he's bound to be somewhere in there, right? Okay, so now let's pick some hands. I clicked Edit Hands, and if you'll remember, I 3-bet preflop from the button versus cutoff, and I don't have any specific reads on this guy, so I'm going to start with what is roughly my 3-betting range. This is not going to be my specific 3-betting range. Don't want to give everything away, but it's just kind of off the top of my head is what I'll be doing. So I'll be 3-betting a value range. I'll take jacks out. Sometimes I might 3-bet jacks. Button versus cutoff. It's going to be, I'll be doing some of these weaker guys, probably somewhere in here. And if I count combos, yeah, this something about like this might look close to a 3-bet range. Maybe we'll put some of these in for balance. You can do a quick check. I like to be around 50-50 value bluffs. I know Queens Plus is 2.5, so actually coming in somewhere around 5 is good. I was pretty close there, 5% exactly. One of the reasons I'm not putting the suited connectors or better aces in this is because I'm actually flatting a lot button versus cutoff. If this was like middle versus early, then I'd be more likely to add suited connectors as my 3-bet bluff. Okay, so this is my 3-bet range, but remember the action went, I bet the flop, check the turn, bet the river. What kind of hands am I going to do that with? And it just occurred to me that for us to have ace-6 suited here, we must have 3-bet it. Another idea is he did make a min raise, right? So I will be going, I just remembered that, I will be going wider for value if someone's min raising. Like it's quite possible I might go something like this. This is a 5% range, 10s plus and ace queens suited, if memory serves. You can check, you can test me. So then we can go wider with our 3-bets here. Maybe we're starting to do something more like this. And again, the important thing here is to show you the technique, and I wouldn't worry quite so much about what I'm actually 3-betting. Okay, so this is good enough. We'll go with this range. And the next question is, okay, of these hands, what am I c-betting on the flop? So what I can tell you right now, I would like to c-bet on this flop are going to be my flush draws and my backdoor flush draws. I might check back some of my flush draws, like my best flush draws. I like checking back some hands, so when I check back, it's not like I never have the flush if it comes in. So I'm going to let's do this. We'll take off everything that we don't bet on the flop. So for example, I might, let's see, what are we going to check back? I'm going to, well, I'll go ahead and say I'm checking back my ace kings and ace queens. I might be betting some of the, I'm definitely checking back the ace king, ace queen of clubs, because like I just said, I'll bet my weaker flush draws, but I like to check back my very best flush draws. They've even got some showdown value, and it's just a nice way to make sure I do show up with the flush sometimes when it comes in on the turn and I check back the flop. Okay, we also hit the queen sometimes when we check back, which is nice. And then maybe some hands like, I might even check back aces some of the time. So, but I can tell you, I'm thinking ahead to the river. And when I do bet aces on the flop, I'm betting them again on the turn. And remember, we check back this turn of queens. So I can take out queens, because if I bet queens on the flop, I definitely would have bet the set on the turn. So I don't show up on the river with that. I don't show up on the river with these. And jacks and tens are pretty likely. Those are good hands that, I could bet the flop because I want to protect them. I check back when this queen falls. So jacks and tens can definitely be in my range. 10-9, I bet the flop. I probably bet the turn. 9-8 is 9-8 and 8-7. I'm probably betting twice. 9-7, I might bet the flop. 10-8. 10-9, I'm probably betting twice. So I'm narrowing in on hands that I might bet the flop and then check the turn. So these are all reasonable examples of that. So 6-5 with the open ender, I might bet the flop. And as far as these guys down here, I'm going to put my the hearts. Let's see. Hearts and clubs. So I'll bet all of these if they're hearts or clubs. I think that's a fair play. Because with the clubs, obviously, we've got the flush draw. Without the clubs, we don't have the backdoor flush draw. And then I might bet again with the ace deuce, because it's though the ace, I never have a flush draw of ace deuce, so I could see checking these back. And what about these in here? Am I betting every single one of these on the flop? Jack 9, we'll say I am betting the flush draw and the heart draw, and the backdoor flush draw and the flush draw. 10-8, yeah, I'll bet all of those because it's a pair and I want protection. 9, same goes for, I have these all in here because they have an 8 or a 7, and then this is an open-ended straight draw. I'm actually going to take out, I will bet twice with the, so the Jack 9 and the 6-5 with the flush draw, I will bet twice. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take out, I think, so the only way I'm going to show, I'll have everything except the flush draws for 6-5. And same goes for Jack 9. The only ones I'm going to have on the river are going to be hearts, because I would have bet Jack 9 again with the flush on the turn. Okay, this looks like a reasonable range for me to get to the river, and I can say done. So that's my range on the river. His range on the river. This is going to be more fun because it's harder to tell what he might have. Now, this is our flop. If I remember the action, I raised. By the way, if you have a tool like Flopzilla, that can make this a little easier, because with Flopzilla, you can pick the kinds of hands as you go. And then you can copy and paste whatever range you come up with in Flopzilla over here. And the way you do that is in Flopzilla, there's a little range button. You click that, copy what you have, and then you can paste it over here. That works for the preflop range. It's a little, I'm not sure that you can actually do that, moving things across once you've selected stuff later in the hand. But anyway, just for working out what you think the ranges are, that might be easier to do in a different tool, and then come over and do it in here. But I'm just kind of doing it on the fly. So what do I think this guy is raise calling me with here? Preflop. Well, when I'm selecting ranges, pro tip, I like to sort of start with broadways, pairs, work my way around this way, and then maybe come back down here if any of those exist. So from the top side, maybe he's re-raising. We'll go conservative. Oh. Okay, so I'm starting with everything, and we'll say maybe down to 6s, something like that. If you want to get fancy, you could do something like, maybe he's got 5s some of the time, but you don't really need to go there. This is a really precise way of doing it. And what else? What else is he's calling me with? Maybe some of these. Maybe some of these, maybe this, and probably something like this. I think it is fair to say something like 50% in here, because these are all hands. Players will 4-bet a fair bit. Some will, some won't. Same person might do it some of the time, depending on who they're up against. And while I've got my 50%ers, I'm going to put these in here. Okay, so this is kind of, we're around 10%. If he is opening, say, 30%, then he's defending a third of that range and a little wider with his 4-bets. Or say 25%. So this is kind of reasonable, I'd say. Put these in here. Some people will defend those some of the time. And this looks okay. So now I can say, okay, well, he check called on the flop. What kind of hand is he check calling with? And I can even start to say, okay, he check called the flop, check the turn, bet the river. What kind of hands is he going to do that with? Well, 4s could be in there. That's one of the first ones that comes to mind. But is he going to play ace king that way? It's possible. I can't rule it out. And actually, I don't even need to consider his river pot size bet because the tool is going to kind of tell me what he would have had there. Okay, so let's see. King, queen, queens, jacks. I'm going to take out these hands because I don't think he's likely to do it with like nines, tens, and jacks. So we can go ahead and take those out. I don't think he's likely to do it. So what is he folding on the flop? I think we can say he's going to fold, let's see, all, none. He's going to, I think he'll continue. Let's get his flush cards here. So he is going to have the queen 10 of clubs. But does he make a pot size bet on the river with it? Let's start with, this will be his range before he makes the pot size bet, because this is his range when he gets to the river. Queen 10 suited, queen jack suited, queens certainly could have all of those. These guys, yeah, I think he shows like he's going to check call the flop with the flushes for all of these things. He never had that. Ace king suited. Anything else? So these, we'll just give him all the flushes, flush draws. And what else? We're going to select the king 9 suited, queen 9 suited. And this is where the weighting, I'm going to let the weighting go because you notice it changed it. So if you're doing the weighting, you've got to make sure you do it again here, apparently. King, queen. I'll go ahead and take these off. I like that better than having it weighted at all. So he's got flush draws that he might show up on the river with, and he's got maybe some ace kings. I'm just going to drop the value of ace king further down because not everyone's going to check call the flop with ace king. So we'll give him, you know, a small percentage of ace king. And then an even smaller percentage of ace queen, maybe with some like backdoor flush draws or something. Because a lot of players are just going to fold out when you bet the flop. And we'll say that he's never has ace jack. Okay. What about these guys? What about these low pairs? Well, I don't think he's going to have... Here, we can do it like this. I don't think he's going to have these guys. Maybe 6 is some small percentage of the time. But then does he jam the river with it? Probably not. But again, this is... So I just realized I said we're going to have what he shows up with on the river. So we got to put these back in because he does show up with those. He may not necessarily bet those. And let's see, anything else? We can reduce 7s and 8s because he's going to check raise those a fair bit of the time. Most people, I think, would check raise those on this board. So we'll say like 20% of the time he chooses not to check raise those. Or maybe he just leads with these hands. And I think we're looking pretty good. I think we're looking pretty good. So I'm going to take this range and say done. And now we have the ranges of both players. And again, just to remind you, the scenario is up until the river. The decision point is the river. So we know that our villain pots the river. But the first thing we can do in this analysis is see what the tool thinks he should have done. Maybe a pot's kind of a weird play, but we can gain insight about what he should have done, and then that'll teach us something potentially about what we can potentially be doing if we happen to be in that spot. Okay, so then we click solve. And these are going to be really fast solving on the river. One more bonus to starting on river analysis is it'll tell you stuff right away, whereas on the flop, sometimes it takes longer. I'll let you click through these, read all these on your own. Tutorial is pretty good. One more reason this is a good place to start. And you can drag these things around. You can use your mouse wheel to zoom in. And I would suggest, just starting out, click this button, only show equilibrium path. And it's going to clean it up just a little to just the important parts. And to understand what's going on, start on the left, at the very left node. This is going to be the beginning of the river. Our villain checks, he bets, and he bets. So one of the advanced options we included was he has the option to jam, okay? And interestingly, he is taking that some percentage of the time. I leave that option in because it could be that that's the best play, and it gives you an idea of, it gives you some more ideas potentially. So let's click here and see what the strategy is. This should look familiar as our opponent's range. And this is, actually, let's start here. You click on the first node, GTO strategy. Okay, so these are the two bet and raise sizes. The dark bets are his bets. The dark is his jam. The light green is his pot size bet. And according to the tool, since we gave essentially two options, one is a pot size bet, one is a jam, he's going to be making his pot size bet all the time with jacks. He's going to try to check tens and nines. He's going to go for the big bets with queens. So I think you'll see this if we give the option for a really big bet and you have the nuts in that range, then what you'll likely see is the GTO solver is going to try to figure out how to bet with the nuts as big as possible, balance that sum, and then if you give it a smaller bet option, then it'll do that with some weaker hands. And that's kind of what we see. So it's viewing jacks as pretty strong here. And so it's betting it all the time, and then it's balancing it with hands that probably have blockers like Jack 10. So that makes it less likely maybe that we've got hands like Queen Jack, Queen 10, that sort of thing. Ace Queen is a mixed strategy here. And Ace King is getting bet again. In this case, it's getting balanced against the king, queen, and queens, which are getting bet for value. If you mouse over it, this will tell you the bet percentages of each. And then we can see what our response should be. So if, in this case, the opponent bet the pot, and we are over here, and we can go to the next node. After he bets the pot, what are we supposed to do? So this, I'll finish with this. This is what answers my initial question. And I want to emphasize that. I think what can happen is, as you can see already, this is getting complex. And when you're approaching studying GTO solutions, I think the best thing to do is come at it with a question, right? So I pulled up a hand, I showed you a hand, and I stated the question as being, well, what should we do on the river with the rest of our range? That was really the question I was going after. And now I've found that node. I found the situation where giving him a range and giving him the option of making a pot size bet, now I can traverse the tree to that situation where he's made his pot size bet, and I can answer the question of, well, what should I do with the rest of my range? If you don't have a question, if you're just kind of poking around, of course that's fine, but you may get a little overwhelmed just because you're like, well, what do I do with all this information? So instead of just kind of diving in and poking around with hands and not risking getting lost, I really recommend asking yourself a question and then trying to use the tool to solve that question. That's going to be your safest bet. Okay, so with our question in mind, clicking on this node, clicking on the GTO strategy, we see what we should do based on the range I'm assessing on the river. We see that we should be folding ace-6 suited, which is indeed what I did. And we see that our defense should be the top of our range. So jacks, in this case, ace-7 suited, tens. I find it a little interesting that, and this is something we can learn here, is that ace-7 suited gets called more than tens. Potential reason for that might be that ace-7 suited actually blocks more of his value range than tens, right? We're blocking the 7, so it's less likely our opponent has something like pocket 7s or 8-7, for example, that he would make, you know, a big pot size bet on the river with. So you'll see things like this, and this is a learning. And if another approach to your study is you can keep a log on this, or a spreadsheet where as you put down a hand, you also have a notes section where you write down your observations and learnings, just so you don't, you know, forget the things you learn. So this gives us an idea. And by the way, when you see a mixed strategy like this, first of all, have a look at what it's, look at the detail. If I mouse over the detail, you see here down in the bottom section of that little window that popped up that it says, with all the tens of clubs, we are folding 100%. When we don't have the 10 of clubs, we're calling 100%. So that's the difference in this. With the 10 of clubs, we are blocking with the 10 of clubs. So I think the logic would be here. The reason we're folding hands with the 10 of clubs, because if we don't have the 10 of clubs, it's more likely he was on a flush draw. You follow that? If we have the 10 of clubs, then we're reducing the number of flush draws that floated the flop that are just air balls on the river. But with the 10 of clubs, we make it a little more likely he was bluffing. So that's the thing we can figure out here. And this will conclude the video. If you like what you saw and want to see more, please click the like button and be sure to subscribe so you get notified when I release more videos like this. This has been Mike Gano for Poker in a Box.